Welcome to The Cynical Developer, the podcast that helps you to improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology and providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we talk to Jonathan Bullock about AsciiDoctor. Jonathan is a software developer who works in the oil and gas industry, mainly on web-based enterprise systems. He's been a Java developer for around 10 years and also has experience with VB, ASP and PHP. His spare time is occupied by either contributing to open source projects such as JBake or AsciiDoctor that we're here to talk about today, or studying for his Masters in the Open University. This is Jonathan's second appearance on the show. Jonathan came on and talked to us about JBake back on episode 4. So once you've listened to this episode, make sure you go back and give that a listen as well if you haven't heard it already. So welcome back to The Cynical Developer, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me again.
Not a problem. You didn't deter my listeners too much, so I thought we'd get you back on to talk about another project.
That's good.
Yes. So, like JBake, is this one of your projects, AsciiDoc?
No, this isn't something. You could call me a fan of this project. I try to help out with some small contributions whenever I get a chance, but I'm just a fan of this.
Sure, like an AsciiDoctor evangelist.
I'd love to be that. Yes, I try to push it as much as possible, and whenever I'm talking to anyone about these kind of things, I do try to push AsciiDoctor as much as possible.
Sure. So anybody that's listening out there that is involved with AsciiDoctor that can help Jonathan achieve his goal of being the evangelist, then get in touch with him.
Thank you very much.
So we'll kick off with, what is AsciiDoc?
Okay, AsciiDoc is essentially one of the many lightweight markup languages that are out there. It can be then converted to a number of different output formats, such as HTML, so you could convert it to a simple web page. You can even produce presentation slide decks from AsciiDoc content. You can output it to PDF, EPUB documents or books, even man pages if you like. The idea behind it is you write your content, be it a blog post, a document, or even a complete book in AsciiDoc format, which aims to be a plain text syntax that is easy for humans to read, to write, and to edit. This content is then converted or translated into the relevant output format you require. Because it's plain text, you can use any editor you really like to edit your AsciiDoc content. There are some editors that provide good AsciiDoc syntax highlighting and support, but the project originated, or the original processor of AsciiDoc was a Python implementation, which is still available today, but it hasn't been updated since around November 2013. Nowadays, the term AsciiDoc is usually used to describe the actual syntax or the markup language itself. Obviously, the most renowned lightweight markup language that most people will be familiar with is Markdown. And one of the major benefits of these lightweight markup languages when it comes to especially the development community is that because the content is plain text, you get to use the version control systems such as Git and all the others that developers already know. And you can use that to version control your actual, your documents, your content, as well as the source code. I think this makes maintaining technical content much more of less of a pain. It's a much easier entry to be doing it. You get to use the same tools you used to.
Okay, so one of the markups that I know of, you did mention it then, is Markdown. So what's the big difference? Why is there AsciiDoc and why is there Markdown? Are they essentially the same thing, or?
Essentially, they are both lightweight markup languages. I suppose the main advantage of Markdown is its simple syntax. However, this advantage is also, I think, it's one of its main shortcomings. And it's why you have so many different implementations. So you've got GitHub flavored Markdown, you've got Stack Overflow flavored Markdown, and there are a lot more than that. There's a quote from the AsciiDoctor website. Even the Internet Engineering Task Force has declared there's no such thing as invalid Markdown, which is probably why there is a push for Markdown to standardize. And it's been tried to, or there's an attempt to standardize all of these different implementations with common mark. When it comes to the comparison, AsciiDoc can be just as simple as Markdown if that's what you need, but its power in AsciiDoc is in its more advanced features, where you end up writing raw HTML when you can't do something you wish you could in Markdown. This also limits your output options. This is where AsciiDoctor really takes over and provides support for those advanced use cases or situations. So it provides support for things like variables, cross-references in your content, includes and tables, etc. I often see people when they're debating which markup language to use, they'll say, oh, but I know Markdown, it's all I need. You may only need what Markdown provides today, but when you need more, you'll find that Markdown probably isn't your right choice. AsciiDoc can be just as concise as Markdown, but gives you the power and flexibility when you really need it.
Okay, so it's a bit of a Swiss Army knife for the markup languages that are there.
Yeah, really. I think it's trying to. It can, as I said, it can be just as simple as Markdown. And I think that's where why Markdown has become so popular. It's got quite a low barrier to get up and running, and AsciiDoc isn't that much of a difference in terms of its entry barrier, but it just keeps on going in its features, whereas Markdown pretty much stops at a certain level.
Sure. So I think I'm probably coming at it from a bit of a naive point of view, that I see a lot of Markdown used mainly for translation into HTML, and I'm sort of sat here thinking, well, if I can't do something in Markdown and I just have to do it in HTML, I might as well do it all in HTML. Why do I have to learn another syntax? What's the benefit of learning another syntax to achieve essentially what's the same thing?
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the major things that AsciiDoc is focused on is it's trying to deliver more than just HTML content. It's trying to solve a real publishing task. So while it is a different syntax in AsciiDoc to what most people may know with Markdown, it is still quite easy to pick up, especially if you are used to using Markdown. And it helps a lot that syntax is consistent in its style with AsciiDoc. You're not just restricted to the more short form content either, such as blog posts. That's where Markdown has really taken hold, I think, and the short readmes you find in open source projects. AsciiDoc can support blog posts if you wish, but it can support those longer form contents, such as technical papers, the manuals, even books. There are quite a few books that have been written in AsciiDoc format. So that investment, when you learn the AsciiDoc syntax, opens up more scenarios for you that you can use that knowledge you've already gained and that knowledge of that syntax and keep going with what you can do with it. I've mentioned some of the advanced features before. If I just take one as an example, includes, and this is one of the things that when I found out about this, I really fell in love with the syntax. It's such a simple concept that most developers will know very well, but it provides such a significant benefit when it comes to managing your technical, content or your documents. Includes allow you to break up your content into more manageable size chunks, and it allows you to apply what as developers will know very often as the dry design principle to reduce content duplication. You can store a chunk of content you need to repeat many times in your document or your manual, say, in a separate file, and include this file each time you need to present that chunk of content. This makes the management of that content or that document significantly easier by reducing the time it takes to keep content up to date. So whenever things change, as they invariably do, rather than thinking I've got to go through 10 occurrences in that document, I can just change that one source file, and when that document is reproduced or re-rendered, the content's up to date. You've made that one change. It just follows those ideas that we're used to as developers. You can even share your content between multiple outputs thanks to the include feature. So it allows you to take chunks of content and reuse them many times. Includes are not only limited to AsciiDoc formatted content either. You can include source code files as well, or even just a subsection of your source code file. You can even annotate notes into the source code by using a few simple characters in the relevant comment syntax of your whichever source code you're using. You can use what they call cue balls to say, to refer to this line is important and this is why. You can also include files from remote locations using URLs as well. This is just the include feature. There are many, many more advanced features like this that AsciiDoc provides you with.
Sure. So it's giving you like a templating engine, really, so that you're not having to repeat everything that you're putting in there. And that dry principle that you referred to is the don't repeat yourself principle. Am I correct with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Just for those out there that aren't too sure about the acronyms, because we are flooded with them in development.
Yes, 3-letter acronyms, TLAs, that's what to call them.
Yeah.
There's an element. AsciiDoc, there are the processor or the converter, as you like, does apply multiple stages. So there is a kind of pipeline going on that allows these things, such as includes, such as variables, and allows these elements to be supported.
Okay, so that's a brief overview of what AsciiDoc is, but what we're here to talk to you about today is AsciiDoctor.
Okay.
So, what is AsciiDoctor?
Okay. AsciiDoctor is a Ruby-based processor of the AsciiDoc syntax. It started off as a script created by, I believe, a staff member at GitHub to support the AsciiDoctor format on GitHub. So obviously, GitHub's a Ruby-based system, so they wanted to support AsciiDoc, so they started off writing their own version of a converter or a processor. That project, somewhere along the lines, then ended up or was taken over the reins by Dan Allen and Sarah White, who now lead the project. And the project encompasses a whole ecosystem. So you've got various build tool plugins, extensions, IDE plugins, ports to other languages such as Java, thanks to JRuby. There's a JavaScript version of it. AsciiDoctor itself is used by both GitHub and GitLab to provide support for the AsciiDoc formatted content on those systems as well.
Right. So, is it an editor as well as everything else, or is it just, as you said, like the pipeline for transpiling?
It is mainly the processor or the converter. It's not trying to be. I can't remember what you called it before now.
Transpiler.
It's not trying to be any more than that. It converts your AsciiDoc syntax files into your chosen output format. So be it HTML, be it PDF, be it an EPUB document. It just does that conversion. That's the, you could call it the tool chain, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I sort of came at this thinking that it was going to be maybe like an IDE or something like that did everything for you.
No, there are a lot of IDE plugins that are out there. A lot of the community has contributed an awful lot since I've kind of been involved. You do have some. One of the things you do have is there is a port in JavaScript that allows you to actually convert the AsciiDoc formatted content directly in the browser. So you can actually have, you can be typing away in your document and you can see the actual real-time changes in your browser. Atom, the editor, there is a plugin for Atom that allows you to be kind of split your screen up into two, so you can have your content on your left-hand side and what the output looks like on your right-hand side, which is extremely handy when you're, get that visual feedback straight away.
Yeah. It is nice that to have that coming straight back to you, so you can see what you're editing.
Yeah, a lot of people are used to, or have been forced to use for technical documents, is Word, unfortunately, word processors, various guises, which unfortunately mixes both the content and presentation in one. And as developers, you're always, it's like we've strived for years to separate, content from presentation in various guises. And I think that's one of the things the AsciiDoc format tries to do, is it tries to separate your content into something that is reusable. You're not restricted, you're not locked in. You can, if you the standard output, where most people will probably want to output, is HTML. AsciiDoctor, the way it actually does that conversion is there's a load of Ruby templates under the hood. Now you can supply your own templates. You can override those templates. You can expand on them, alter them. So you can include your own company logo, so it's included on every piece of output automatically without you having to include it in your content. It gives you that control over the whole pipeline. Gives you flexibility.
Right. So those templates are the sort of thing that you would hand off to the designers or the front end guys in your team. So all the guys that have been writing the technical documentation for the back end of your system could write it in this markdown, and it would, I guess, through the default templates, would just produce a very basic document. But then the front end or the designer guys could say, well, I'm going to build a template for it, and we're going to make it really nice and fancy.
Yep.
And you can also version control these and not be too concerned that your front end guys are changing the actual layouts and stuff like that.
Yeah. You've got you're kind of breaking up that responsibility, giving people the relevant chunks of responsibility that they need. You do get, say for example, HTML one. It's going to be the most obvious output that most people use. You do get a default style sheet that comes along with it. There are a project that allows you to, the community. I don't know whether it's Dan Allen actually that's provided most of this, but there's a number of default style sheets or themes that you can apply to your HTML output, which is designed around the templates that have been produced. It gives you a whole suite of themes that you can actually just go along and go, that looks good. I prefer that one over the default. I'll take that and include it in. There's a lot of effort already been put in to just make the default output look decent, without you having to do anything else. If you're just purely a developer, you can run your content through the AsciiDoctor pipeline, get your HTML, and you've got fairly good looking content without you having to invest too much effort into making it look personal. It's decently formatted out of the tin.
So you've got these templates that are producing this really nice HTML. It's all styled and things. That's really nice for HTML. But if you're doing stuff like the PDFs that we spoke about, now I know that you can take HTML and convert that to a PDF. Is that the same route that it's doing through that? So do those templates work across it? No.
That's where, due to the intricacies, anyone who's ever worked with PDF generation will probably know it's quite a task. It is the original Python implementation went through a number of, shall we say, pipeline stages. You went from your AsciiDoc content to a middleman, or to DocBook, which is, shall we say, if death by XML is something you like, then you'll love DocBook. There was a various pipeline that involved various stages to try and get to a PDF output. One of the things the AsciiDoctor project has done, and Dan Allen's done, is to make PDF a first-class citizen in its output. So it's using I believe it's a Ruby library called Prawn off the top of my head,
right?
To actually produce first-class, PDF it's talking the relevant, using what it knows about the AsciiDoc content, and that legwork has been done to how best to present that in PDF format. So while furthermore, should we say, primarily probably because PDF is a binary format, or you can think of it as a binary format, even though there's probably PostScript in place somewhere. It's not just a plain text in a way output, such as HTML is. So there's a lot more effort needs to go on to do that conversion. So that isn't template based, but the support is there.
Right. Yeah, I have been blessed, shall we say, to do PDF creation in the past, and as the listeners will know, if they're a long-time listener, I'm a .NET developer, and it's not been the nicest route to producing good-looking PDFs. There's quite a few different libraries out there for doing it, but you tend to come down to placing lines and moving elements on X and Y axes, and you're doing a lot of stuff blind. Whereas I guess with the templating that's here, it would be great because I could output my requirements document to AsciiDoc, stick it into a folder, and I could have another pipeline that picks that up, produces it, and then my application could pull back and say, "Oh, it's ready," and there's the PDF, and it would be consistent and probably a lot easier to work with from what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things that I liked when I first came across it. HTML is probably the main destination format, as I said earlier, but PDF, as much as it's it's Adobe's format, it's become very popular, and especially as I come from a corporate world, it's extremely useful for distributing content. So as much as I would prefer to use alternatives, it's a required element, and having support for it is ticks a big box for me.
Yeah. Not to dwell too much on the PDF stuff, but as you say, it's owned by Adobe. Do you need a license for any libraries from Adobe, or is that now, because you were saying it's a first-class citizen, is there a library that AsciiDoctor uses?
It's AsciiDoctor, as far as I'm pretty much, it's off the top of my head here, but I'm pretty sure it uses a Ruby library called Prawn to do most of the conversion process.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I've seen commentary that it's been a long process. I've done it myself in the Java world, producing PDFs, and there's an awful lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Of using the API you may have, and then actually seeing what it looks like at the end. I think the benefit of what Dan Allen's done is you can focus on writing your content in a simple format, and knowing at the end you're going to get a decently rendered PDF that is consistent, and you can use the markup elements and the syntax you're used to in AsciiDoc, knowing that you'll get what you expect as an output. And that's, I suppose, the biggest advantage.
Yeah. We mentioned as well that it's built on Ruby. What platforms is that available? Is it cross-platform? Is it only available to Linux users, or what can we expect from it?
Okay, AsciiDoctor will run on Windows, OS X, and Linux. The major prerequisite, it requires a Ruby implementation to run. And those implementations are available on those platforms. You also have AsciiDoctor J for those running on the JVM, and that's thanks to JRuby. And as I mentioned earlier, there is AsciiDoctor.js, which allows you to, if you're focusing on HTML, it allows you to process AsciiDoc content and convert it to HTML directly in your browser. So there are many options there for you. You can use AsciiDoctor. The primary, or should we say, one of the main interfaces is a command line interface, allowing you to convert your AsciiDoc files from a command line. You can use it as a Ruby library in your own project. You can use one of the various build tool plugins available. There are a few I'm from the Java world, so I know there's one for Maven, there's one for Gradle, and there are an awful lot now, thanks to the Dan Allen and Sarah White. There are support for numerous static site generators out there as well that are using AsciiDoctor to support AsciiDoc content, formatted content.
Well, that leads very nicely as a very great segue onto my next question, which is that you came on episode 4 and you talked about JBake, which was about taking markdown files and the likes and creating static websites. Now, for the $10,000 question, does JBake support AsciiDoctor?
It does, and that's thanks to AsciiDoctor J, that allows JBake to support AsciiDoc formatted content. I came across AsciiDoctor in my day job.
Right.
I was faced with having to update a user manual that was unfortunately written in Word, which was then converted to a horrible HTML and PDF. And I thought, there's got to be a better way of doing this. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And during my research, my goal was to separate, where Word is showing you what you're writing and presenting in all in one. I thought there's got to be a better way of doing this for technical documentation. And during that time, I came across the research Dan Allen had done. I think he had a very similar situation. He was looking for solutions to this, and he'd done a load of research and presented what he'd found, and I came across AsciiDoc, and I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I've been looking for, and I've been following the project ever since. And when support for JVM languages was added, because of that AsciiDoctor J, I thought I can add that into my own little project, which was JBake.
Yeah.
So I added it, and because of that, I now, whenever I come across anyone looking at simple markup languages, I always try to push them towards AsciiDoc.
Yeah, and I can feel your pain about websites made in Word. We were talking before we started recording about projects that we used to do years and years ago, and my very first website, it was quite a big website as well. It was probably, well, I say big website. It was a big website for back then, and it must have been about 30 odd pages, and that was all made in Word. And it used to get a lot of traffic, but a lot of people used to complain because it used PNG images that Word produced, and some IE6 implementations would show it and others wouldn't. And I used to spend hours and hours updating these pages because there was no HTML includes and all that sort of stuff. So I'd add a new page and it'd be in the navigation somewhere. I'd have to go through every page and re-implement it. Long gone are those days, but I still have nightmares and wake up in cold sweats thinking about that website.
I think those experiences make us appreciate the advances that has happened in that particular world.
Yeah, definitely does. And the horrors that I faced doing that, and the horrible HTML it produced, it's a wonder that I ever sort of thought, oh, this is really nice, I like this, and carried on and stuck with it.
I suppose I'm the same. You look back and go, why did I think this was good again?
Yeah.
This was painful to write. I suppose that's why these simple markup languages, the primary output, most people, they're avoiding writing HTML because, too many angle brackets. But, the idea of these markup languages, they should be human readable. You should be like writing an email, using simple, stars, hyphens, just to indicate a list of things. Turning that into a HTML list should be it's quite easy to do, but that's why they exist, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm trying to introduce a friend at the moment into web development. He's not really technically minded, but he wants to become a developer, and I've set him off on a course through Udemy to go and learn how to write HTML and stuff. And all the angle brackets and things were really messing with his head. He was saying he couldn't understand it. So I had to sort of sit down and go through it bit by bit to explain it. And something like this, I think, would be great because he could just go, oh, I'd do it in this. And it'd be really straightforward. But then he wouldn't know what the output it was producing. And I think that's a skill set that he needs, really.
Yeah, I've been in a very similar situation, and I've hesitated where I thought, should I be getting them to learn HTML? But then that is what the browsers expect.
Yeah.
They need to have an understanding of what's going on, why it's used, what it does, how the browser utilizes it. So it's a necessary evil, I suppose.
Yeah, it is, and eventually, he probably won't write that much of the markup himself. He'll probably use a template engine or something like that in the end. But you've got to get that grounding first. Yeah,
that's one of the big, I think, things is I find a lot more people looking towards AsciiDoctor and AsciiDoc formatted content for producing these HTML slide decks and presentations, because they find writing the content, or the bullet points, the bullet lists in AsciiDoc much quicker and easier, knowing that it will produce the bespoke presentation at the end. And there's a lot of community contributed back ends, as they call it, to produce. Take your AsciiDoc content and produce a bespoke slide deck out of it, without you having to do too much. Again, you may want to tweak the theme or the style, but that doesn't. AsciiDoc's not going to solve that whole problem in one go for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It sounds very nice. And when I was producing large, complicated PDFs, this definitely seems like something I could have done with, but didn't find, which is a shame. I had to have bleeding knuckles and a sore forehead from banging it on the desk of building it with .NET libraries. So it's definitely something I'll have to remember for the future to check out and use.
One other major thing that I should mention is, while it's extremely powerful AsciiDoc and what it already provides, the syntax was designed to be extended from the ground up.
Right.
So even though there's an awful lot of power already there, you have got the option to extend the syntax yourself. So you can add additional support for your particular use case or scenario that you find yourself in. That's been something that has been designed, from the ground up within the syntax. So it is extensible, and it is something that I've utilised in my having to produce a rather large user manual in my day job.
Yeah. Oh, so I guess that means that if I was doing like the user manual, but there was some oddity with the layout, that the page had to have the page number in the top right hand corner, the bottom left hand corner, with a circle in the middle of the page, that you could do that with your syntax on here.
That would probably be dealt with more so from the tweaking the templates.
Right.
You don't actually, and I've had a very similar situation to that one. You're not forced to kind of implement everything of the templating suite. The templates themselves are broken down into smaller, manageable chunks, and if you're just looking to tweak that bit, you can override that particular template. You're not having to re-implement every part of the template.
Okay.
So if you're just particularly saying how many companies would just like their logo in the top left-hand corner, you're just looking to the header section. That's the bit you really want to hook into and tweak. Yeah. I suppose the syntax is for supporting. One of the other things you can do is embed videos, HTML5 videos. The syntax for doing that. There's syntax for tables out of the box, for variables, which are a very powerful feature when it comes to technical documentation. You can extend the syntax there. It's just one avenue. You might not ever need to use it, but the power's there for you to when you need to.
So we mentioned that it was that AsciiDoc originated from GitHub. So all the source code for it is naturally on GitHub there for you to go and have a look at.
The AsciiDoc itself it originated, I believe, from the Python community.
Right.
From Stuart Rackham. The AsciiDoctor script that originated from somebody at GitHub, and yes, all of the source code is on GitHub. I would, if anyone wants to know more, the GitHub organization for AsciiDoctor is a great starting place to see what's going on in the community and the ecosystem, and all of the available things you can get related to AsciiDoc. That is a great place to go and see what's available.
Sure, and you've got AsciiDoctor.org as well, which has got a bit of an introduction and some code samples and stuff like that on there.
Yeah, depending on what you're looking for, there is they have got a quick start guide on AsciiDoctor.org, which gets you going really quickly with the syntax. I've had it in my day job where I've had to bring other people in maybe to contribute sections of content, and they're not developers by trade. And I thought, right, this will be a good test. I've pointed them at the quick start guide, and they can get up and running really quickly and think, oh yeah, I can contribute really quickly with this.
Yeah.
it gets you up and running really quickly. The real power is then documented in the extremely comprehensive user manual, which is quite large, but you can then start dipping in and out of that when you need the more advanced features. It's a lot of work has gone into the AsciiDoctor user manual, and I constantly refer back to it whenever I need to know, or there's a particular feature I need to use. I'll go and refer to that. That's probably the most comprehensive reference point.
Fantastic. Well, we're just about out of time. So I'm going to thank you for coming on again and sharing something yet again completely new to me. It's been good to have you on and to talk about this.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, not a problem.
Pleasure.
And I hope everyone out there in listener land has got something from this. So thanks for listening to Cynical Developer. I'm James Stoddart, and you've been listening to Jonathan Bullock talking about AsciiDoctor. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform and help the Cynical Developer to grow by increasing its audience. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website, where you can find all the resource links and show notes for each episode.